an honour and a privilege, but I also feel it was a great responsibility. So I think I've carried, as a new head teacher, additional burdens that perhaps a white head teacher may not have faced. But, you know, the reward of that was it made me work harder and perhaps try to even achieve even more. I think how I overcame some of those challenges in my as a teacher and as a head teacher was really I had a lot of support. And that is the one great advantage of people, particularly from the Asian subcontinent and a lot of families. If you have the extended family and the support, it does make quite a lot of difference. So I was very fortunate to have that. I did always not necessarily take the easiest step. You know, I sometimes took, you know, extra roles. I became a parent governor, I became a teacher governor. I tried to extend myself all the time. And in my, you know, when I talked about current teachers, I do think we have to come out of our comfort zone a little bit and try to extend ourselves a bit more. Always in every sort of interaction, in every role, I've been always trying to be really proud of my background, my religion, culture and heritage, not to hide it, but be very open about it and share it with people. And what was really great for me was the impact of the changes that I was able to lead with the support of staff, getting, you know, the results changing, getting successive Ofsted reports and putting the school that I was leading on the map. And, you know, from very, very humble beginnings, really, in terms of, you know, my mother wasn't educated. She didn't have a formal education until 16 and so on. And yet, you know, her daughter was the first to go to university, the first one, you know, to actually be working while she was married with children as well. So I've had lots of challenges, but lots of support that has led to you know, some of the things I've been able to succeed in. I retired in 2012 at the age of 60. And then, like lots of people, thought I was going to put my feet up and just go on holiday. But, you know, I got a little bit bored after about 6 months. So I started doing lots of voluntary stuff. I got involved in Queen Mary. I got involved in Mosaic, Princess Trust, and my Migration Museum projects, and lots of other projects. And I landed up just sometimes you may find that you're in the right place at the right time for opportunities to come to you. And I was actually as a consultant in Draper schools, advising them how they can improve their achievement. And they needed a CEO. I took it on an interim basis. And now I'm their permanent CEO. There are 5 schools in that multi-academy trust. And I've got the privilege of working with the principals and leading those schools to outstanding. So that's where I am now. So in terms of, you know, what people were interested in tonight is what I consider to be some of the challenges for students, Muslim students in our schools. I think one of the key challenges for young people, Muslim students, is actually their identity. And if a school environment is one that really is open, it's, you know, it's not just on paper, but there's a whole culture within the school where the diversity of the students and the staff is really celebrated and is very open, then it makes it much, much easier for students. Otherwise, students have to hide what is the most important part, which is their identity. And if I give you an example, and this is going many, many years back when I was at school, in the grammar school, and I remember fasting during Ramadan. Now, there was no understanding of fasting at that time. I was the only Muslim girl in the school. And I used to pretend, they say, oh, come on, let's have lunch. I said, no, I'm dieting today. And I did that for 30 days and nobody even picked that up. That doesn't happen now. I'm really pleased about that. But there are schools where they've got good awareness, but I would also say there are schools with not as much awareness. So I think being able to be, you know, that's a challenge if you're in an environment where, you know, there isn't that knowledge and that understanding. What's the importance of a hijab for a girl? What is the importance of, you know, the Jummah prayer for boys, for example? You know, so I think if there is an understanding of that, then things can be accommodated a lot easily and so on. So I think having an identity and being able to, you know, share that identity in the school will make students a lot more comfortable. I think always a big challenge for Muslim students is the sort of stereotypes and the negative images that are around of Muslims and so on. And sometimes you almost have to, Muslim students, they feel they're in that very difficult position of having to deal with things that are actually not their problem. That is not what a Muslim is. When something is seen as a Muslim issue, they have to feel they have to answer for it. And that shouldn't, that puts an extra burden on schools, or on them as individuals. I think, again, sometimes balancing, you know, for Muslim students, what are the demands or the requirements or the requests or what parents want with what the school wants. And I remember, you know, in our year 7 in our school, there were a lot of girls in our school who were actually going to the madrasa after school, you know, so year 7, first year in secondary school, they're inundated with homework, adjusting to the new thing. And then they're expected to go to the mosque from something like 4:30 to 6:30 and so on. And if the school doesn't understand some of those pressures and the parents don't understand the expectations of the school, then you get a lot of conflict there. So it is important for that understanding between home and school, and that child should not be the piggy in the middle between the home and the school and so on. And I think one of the other things our young people in schools need to develop, the academic is very important. And a lot of parents are very encouraging. They want them to do well in maths and English and and so on. But you have kids very talented in art, or they're very talented in music, or and sometimes sometimes the wings are clipped by parents. So sometimes we as schools have to make sure we're able to say that child is really interested in journalism, you know, and English, she's got flair for it. Why not encourage her in that rather than just being a doctor? Not just being a doctor, but sometimes parents have that. So aspirations of parents and aspirations of children sometimes come into conflict. And I think for me, as being CEO and seeing some of the issues in schools at the moment, I think some of our young people, we talk about the vulnerable students, the disadvantaged students being at a greater disadvantage. And I would say that some Muslim students could be in that category due to the digital poverty. You know, they may not have access. They live with large families. They may be sharing devices and so on. You know, we know some of our children are in large extended families and so on, may not have their own room for study and so on. So all those issues are actually expanded, you know, for students because they may not have their own room to work. So I do think, you know, those could be general issues, but I think sometimes they're quite pertinent to some of our Muslim students. And I think aspirations, although parents may have high aspirations, sometimes, and I've seen it as head teacher of a school, sometimes the aspirations for girls are not as high as for the boys. So sometimes, you know, you see a very bright young woman who's got the potential for university and the parents may not have that as their first priority. So I think, again, encouraging parents to look at their own child and look at their abilities. And the other way around is for the parents to also concentrate on the education and attitude of the boys. Because a couple of years back, there was a big conference in Waltham Forest about Muslim boys. You know, like they used to talk about Afro-Caribbean boys and their behaviour in school, they were talking about Muslim boys and how they were, you know, misbehaving in schools and how they were not respecting female teachers, and some of that from the macho culture that they were getting involved in, involvement in drugs and crime and so on, are things coming into our communities as well. So we need to be mindful of that. I think I just want to now cover the sort of challenges, what I think are for staff in our schools, Muslim staff, particularly teachers. I think for any teacher, I would say, having spent over 40 years in education, the demands on teachers are high. I think they're higher now than when I was a young teacher. I can really say that. I had my own classroom, more or less I could do what I liked. Ofsted wasn't even on the horizon when I was a young teacher and so on. The accountability is really there. to do with it's a very demanding profession with greater accountability, planning, monitoring, lots going on. And I think every teacher needs to be prepared for that. It's not an easy profession. And we are very much, currently in the news in terms of the importance of it. And I think parents are realising, and general public is reading, what importance we have to society and so on. So I would say it's a challenge, the demands, but also comes with that the responsibility and so on. And I think it's such a wonderful profession that we enter, and the demands are high. However, the rewards are phenomenal and so on. I think one of sometimes the challenge for Muslim staff in schools is sometimes actually fitting into the school culture. And again, just like I said with students, the culture in schools does actually change. In some schools, there's a very hierarchical structure. In the staff room, there will be particular chairs that only certain staff will sit on. And, a newly qualified teacher going in and sitting in the middle of that, seating that's reserved for maybe, the English department. They sometimes just don't realise the different culture and the expectations in school, the school politics that's there. But I really do feel also that staff, any new member of staff, needs to somehow get their foot in through the door in the staff room and really make sure they do get involved in social events, end of term mixing with others at an informal level. I mean, the networking that happens in schools, and I know in businesses happens a lot of what happens outside school, but even within schools, I think, those sort of members of staff who tend to keep a little bit, they work really hard, they're in their classroom, they're working, they're marking, they're teaching, wonderful relationship with students, but they don't do that mix with the staff, they actually will get isolated and they will actually get overlooked as well. Sometimes you have to blow your own trumpet as well. It's a really sad thing to say. Other people may not recognise you. You have to sometimes let it be known you're doing X, or your student says something, or you put something in the newsletter, or you advertise an extracurricular that you've done. So it's very important is trying to promote yourself and promote your, what your beliefs are. This thing of, particularly women, I'd say again, the work-life balance, you can't. Sometimes, I know staff in my school who would, at the end of school, would be having to go and pick up children, so would be out of the door. People need to understand that. And I think management in schools need to really value those sort of staff as well. They may have to go out of the door at 3:35 when the bell goes, but they still will mark their work at home and will stay up late at night to do the planning and so on. It doesn't matter. I don't believe in presence, just to be around for the social aspect of it. But I do think people need to know that you're a good teacher, that you're doing everything that's required. And I think, having a work-life balance, having kids to pick up, I think it makes you a good teacher. You understand and you can relate to other people. I think sometimes the Muslim teacher becomes the go-to person on Muslim issues. Oh, this child is having problems, the parent is complaining, they will come to you to solve that problem. Now, you can see that as an opportunity because you can increase your, learn more pastoral skills on that. But you might be the head of English, that's your first priority. So you get involved in things that you want to do, but sometimes you say, no, this is my priority and so on. There are pastoral staff. They can come and talk to me for advice, but they're the ones who need to, take on that responsibility. And I think it's important for Muslim staff to become involved in extracurricular staff, take on governor roles if you can, get involved in staff associations, get involved in union representation. So widening your role, widening your experience. So if you have a wish to go up the promotion ladder, all those things, you're not doing it for promotion, you're doing it to learn, but those things that come in very, very important. And sometimes people don't see that there is all these additional little things that you can add to your skills, and also get you well known. I think the school dress code is something that, again, we know, in our Drapers Academy, we've got a very strict dress code for men with ties and suits and so on. And quite rightly, they've got professional attire for women. Okay, what would be suitable in an office? And with that is, a hijab, it's the jilbab, it's the shalwar kameez, it's traditional dress as well. But some, schools aren't that point, and so on. So it's very, very important that you adhere to that, whatever the school dress code is. And in some schools I've gone into, jeans are the norm. In other schools, it's very smart, and you try. We've got it even to footwear in the school. It can't be trainers, it can't be this, just like we have for the staff and so on. So adhering to the school dress code, but under equalities, no school in this day and age should be saying you can't wear a hijab, you can't wear, jilbab, you can't wear shalwar kameez. That's not acceptable, and so on. And I think what we have to see, a big role as teachers and so on, but we're there for role modelling for our students. They've got to see us in those different positions of responsibility and be around the table to make those decisions that affect their lives and so on. And also we've got to see ourselves as a role model for staff as well, because we may be the only Muslim teacher within the school. Myself as a CEO, we've got 350 staff in that school. Yes, we have got a handful of staff, I think, but nowhere within the senior leadership of the schools or at the mat level is there a Muslim woman. I am the CEO. And, what I do and what I say and how I'm perceived, it's not just me as a CEO. Actually, for those people in a very white area, I'm the Muslim. That's how they're going to see a Muslim. And so when I leave in a few years' time, the image I leave behind will be myself as a CEO, but myself as a Muslim woman. And it's very important for you to realise you're carrying all these different responsibilities as well. And I think, we've got to show within the school we've got these extra skills and extra knowledge. So, use them. So our knowledge of language, I was able to, converse very easily in Punjabi, in Urdu, even understand a little bit of Bengali. And that really, really helped with our parents. When we were planning the calendar, I used to advise the whole borough schools, every school, 15 schools in the borough, about when Eid was, when Ramadan was, when it would be particular events, so that people built them in. So they didn't have parents' evenings. They didn't organise big sports day in the middle of Ramadan. Before I was in Newham, nobody else did that. And, it created problems. So we can influence not just at our school level, but in a wider way. And I think what it does do is reassure parents when they see staff, Muslim staff in this school, and they're from that background, to see those people in pastoral roles as head of English or head of maths or whatever, it feels their children are in an environment where they've got positive role models and so on. And I think I just, want to say at the end, always see teaching as a privilege. We have this absolute godsend of a gift of influencing people's lives, not just in our subject areas, not just as a science teacher, but in our values, in our way that we behave, and the lives, conversation you have with a teacher. Sometimes you won't even know the value of that conversation until 10 years down the road, somebody will say, Miss, you said this to me and it made me do X, and now I'm in position Y because of what you said. So really look at this as a privilege in the job that you're in, and it will have impact for a long time to come, and so on. So I want to end there only from the point of view I've given a sort of a little bit of a brush strokes of, one, my journey, secondly, what I see as the key challenges for young people in our schools, and thirdly, about what are the key things about students in our staff, Muslim staff, and some of the challenges, some of the rewards that we have. But I really want to open it up for questions and comments. I'll start with one question that I was asked, actually. I think that was sent to Aftab, and that was a question in relation to shalwar kameez. And the question was, wearing shalwar kameez, what are your experience of being unconventional And, you know, in some people, it might have shown it was an anti-British attitude and so on. So really, my comment on that question was, it was a very conscious decision I made. You know, it wasn't something I just, oh, well, I'll wear Shavakamis today, I'll wear trousers tomorrow. No, it was when I became a head teacher, and actually when I was a classroom teacher as well, but particularly as a head teacher, I thought I was in this role now, and a lot of people are going to look at me as heading up this school in Newham. The one thing, obviously, it made it easier in some ways, that 70% of the Muslim students in that school were Muslim. There were 10% Hindus, 10% Sikh, a number of other faiths as well, but very small numbers. And it was very important for me that I was able to show, one, to the whole community of Newham, that there was a Muslim head teacher here, and you know, that I was very proud of my identity and my background. And I hope it helped me to relate to the families that I was serving, but also I wanted to instill a sense of pride within the girls, because there was this thing of, you know, you leave your culture at home and you come to school, right? And that's what I was like when I was in the grammar school. I felt the two things were totally separate, and I didn't want that happen to the girls within my school. So I really wanted to show you could be a head, you could be Pakistani, you could be Muslim, and you can have multiple identities, and you'd be very, very proud of that. And really, that people respect you for the work that you do. And when the results started to rise, the reputation of the school improved, there's a waiting list. It wasn't that I was, you know, I wanted to be seen as a good head teacher. Really, you know, that I was doing the job well. In addition to that, I had other qualities, and the other qualities was my background and my ability to be able to relate to families. You know, I think it helped me being a mother as well, because I had teenage children and I was dealing with teenage girls as well within the school. So therefore, you know, you carry all these multiple things. So with the Shavakamis, it was a conscious decision. And I think we need to be open and honest about it, and talk to children and talk to staff as well. So that was one of the questions. Okay, I'll open it up to other questions now.
Thank you so much, Bushra, for that, and for sharing your journey. I really enjoyed that, and I'm sure everyone on this call did. And there's lots to think about, you know, what you shared and what you said, not just as educationalists, but I guess everyone, you know, the role that we all have in terms of tackling some of the issues that you refer to. So we'll take questions now. I can see someone's put their hand up, and we'll take them one at a time. So if you've got a question, please put your hand up, and I can call on you. Likewise, if you want to just put a question in the chat, I can make sure that I pick that up. So Habibullah Mohammed's got a question or a comment.
You're on mute, Habibullah.
Oh, I was saying thank you for your talk. It was really enlightening, and I'm really interested in education myself. I'm a 2019-20 Aziz scholar, and I wanted to ask you, because just like you, but probably a few years later, I came to the UK from Nigeria at 7, and what you mentioned about the madrasa really struck a chord with me, because when you come from like a religious family, your parents, especially if you come from a religious country like Pakistan, your parents will be very much focused on you getting your hifz, getting your Islamic education, stuff like that. And it's, in fact, sometimes they might even find it more important than your school work.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering what your experience with that was, how you dealt with it, and how you sort of balance it. Because another situation we kind of have in the UK is that a lot of the madrasas are oversubscribed as well. So you even get that education if you want to, or even if you can't afford it. So
I mean, one of the things that was really important for me to, one, open the eyes of my staff to know what was happening outside, because they saw the kids at the end of school and that was it, really. And yet I used to go home after a parents' evening, see all these kids coming out of the madrasa at 6:30. So I know where a lot of the children were going. When, you know, year 7 came in, what I started doing, I said, look, try to build a picture. What are the experience of the children? So if they're going to dance class or they're going to Chinese class, that was all valued. But we never valued that they were learning Arabic and they were going to madrasa and they were very fluent. And when they finished their Quran, it was sort of hidden somewhere. So actually bringing that out in a much more open way is really, really important. And one of the things, I mean, I did retire at the time. There was a big movement in Newham about opening up schools for community education. So one of the things I was going to start to do was actually work with our local mosque to have the madrasa, the teachers come into school. So that, I mean, it was their responsibility, but one, they had, you know, an interactive whiteboard, they had classrooms, they had all the resources. They had the children on tap because the children were in school. So rather than going home and come back, they could do it for a shorter period of time, a sustained period of time with nice resources. So I do think projects like that could actually help the children. It could be shorter and being part of the school, and actually some of the things to do with the teaching in the madrasas. University of East London set up a PGC course for, you know, teachers in madrasas. And I advise them on that because I think it's very important for those teachers to have skills and so on. So I do think it's important to balance. I think that's the thing for my teacher to realise, yes, the children are having this experience. For the parents to know also there is an expectation about homework and how are they going to balance it if they go 2 hours? And it might be, you know, for in year 7 quite important, but when it goes to GCSEs or year 10, it'll be more difficult and so on. So it's that communication I think is important, you know, between home and school, and not hiding this extra thing that's going on. You know, if children are going to Chinese schools on a Saturday to learn their language, it's something people are very proud of and they share it. Whereas you go to a madrasa, it's look, oh, no, that's not talked about and so on. So opening up the discussion and being proud of it, I think is important as well.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very, very enlightening.
Thank you, Habibullah. Great question. Sajida has her hand up.
Yeah, hello, assalamu alaikum, Bushra and all the participants. Bushra, I had the pleasure of working at Blashet School many, many years ago.
That's really lovely to see.
Oh, lovely to see you. And I can attest that it was such a lovely school to work in, and the girls were so well mannered and very aspirational and high achieving. And I really, really enjoyed my work there. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you actually was, as a Muslim woman, you know, starting in your career and, you know, onward, did you ever suffer from kind of microaggressions or even overt racism, and how did you deal with it? And obviously, in terms of, you know, Black Lives Matter, you know, in the summer, I mean, obviously it's been before the summer, but in the summer it really came to light. And, you know, is there work that you're doing in school to, you know, promote, you know, people being able to talk about their experiences and share, you know, how they feel? Yeah.
It's lovely to see you, Sadida. Really, really nice. And looking at you, I do remember you. What's your role now, Sadida? What do you do now?
So I'm a careers lead at St Bonaventure School.
All right.
Still
in Newham. Okay.
Yeah, stayed in Newham. I think I worked in nearly all the schools in Newham. But I'm also undertaking, with the help of the Aziz Foundation, I'm undertaking a master's in positive psychology and coaching, because I'm very interested in, you know, people's aspirations and, you know, how their self-efficacy and how they feel about themselves and the impact that it has on their success.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much indeed. A sort of aggression and a sort of racism, stroke. I think, yes, it's really odd. You sometimes think of racism coming from white people, but sometimes you actually get it from within the community. So, for example, when I went to university, you know, either towards me or my parents was this thing, why in 1975, when majority of girls would not be going to university, Muslim girls would not be going to university, my parents had to really justify why they felt confident enough to send me to university and why they didn't want to get me married off at 18 and so on, which was the norm. So you have to realise that racism or uncomfortable behaviours can come from within the community as well, and so on. I think within teaching, one of the jobs that I applied for was for a deputy head in one of the schools, and I did not get the job. And the person who was appointed was actually on a lower scale than me. She didn't have as much experience as me. And actually, a number of people at that stage said to me, "This is racism." It was a white teacher who was promoted. And interestingly, I really thought long and hard about it. Do I want to challenge this, or do I just walk away? And I had a really interesting conversation with the chair of governors who was on the panel. And she said to me, "Bushra, I'll tell you now, you were the better candidate. You performed better in the interview, but the head teacher did not want you." Now, if she said, if I as a chair of governors had put you in that position, because she obviously was the person who had the final say, I know that would have ruined you. So I went with the head. Now, you could say that was racism. You know, it was also to do with my inability just to agree to everything, because I was, as a teacher, I would challenge and I would ask questions and I would think a little bit outside the box a little bit. So the head teacher found that comfortable. So in the end, I left that school, and honestly, it was the best decision I made, because within 3 years I was a head teacher, and perhaps if I'd stayed that school, I would not have progressed. So I think I've faced it, but I've just turned it into a positive, really, in terms of there may be negative things going on. It's their problem. They didn't appoint me, but I got my headship and did really, really well. In terms of this Black Lives Matter agenda, I think it's opened up a whole area that schools need to be looking at in a really, really open way. And I'd say it goes back to the curriculum, really, that we've got to start looking at, you know, the history curriculum. We've got to look at the geography curriculum, you know, in terms of, you know, different countries and perceptions and the history of migration. One of the very interesting projects, you know, I'm involved in, as I mentioned in my introduction, is this thing about setting up a migration museum and looking at those migration journeys of our young people in our schools and so on, and the contributions that different people have made to society. And I do think it's time now, through PSHE, certainly, rather than a soft subject, you start to tackle some of these quite big issues, because it is about self-esteem, it is about history, and it's about moving things forward and having an honest debate about it. So it's opened up a whole agenda, really, which I think is it needs to be discussed. But I do think staff need to be trained well for dealing with those subjects. They need to have the knowledge base as well as the skills to be able to have that controlled conversation that doesn't get up with they said, he said, and because if it's handled badly, it's actually worse than not handling it at all.
Yes.
So I think the Migration Museum actually are going to do some podcasts and things to help and do some training for teachers on handling some of those sensitive issues.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you very much.
It's lovely to see you, Sajida, and best of luck in your role.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat from Aftab, who asks, how has Prevent affected Muslim students and staff? And just to add to that, what should our response be to that?
Okay, well, I mean, I was very disappointed with the sort of the variability of the Prevent training, really. That has, I've brought that to light in a number of quarters and so on, that it was rather mixed, let's put it that way, you know. However, it's raised an issue in schools, and I think, you know, we've got to be very clear about the data about Prevent, though, because it has shown up not just, you know, young people getting involved in Islamic groups and so on, but it's also picked up a very large number, and particularly in the area that I'm working in, about the white extremists and the work that's being done on that, and what needs to be done in order to help those young people. So some of the data is actually telling us there is a problem there, but it's what you do with that data and the support. But also that issue to do with Prevent needs to be handled very sensitively. So I'll give you one example. And this was a Muslim teacher, actually, head of a school. I won't name the school. And the head teacher phoned me and said, look, I just really need to talk to you about something. I'm really concerned whether I should refer this girl to Prevent. I said, okay, talk to me. What's happened? She goes, oh, it's very bright student doing really, really well and so on. And all of a sudden, just out of the blue, she started reading Islamic books and she has started wearing the hijab, which she didn't do before. And, you know, the staff have raised concerns and should I refer her? And I said, when was it? Obviously, when he told me the month, I said, that was Ramadan. Lots of young people do change or try to change during that month. And this is a Muslim teacher, believe it or not. So I was quite surprised that he wasn't aware of it. And I said, have we had a conversation with the girl? Has somebody spoken to her? Said, no. Well, so that's the first thing to start and so on. And recognizing this is quite normal for young people to start praying more, perhaps to think about their dress a bit more. And so this isn't an extremist view. This is somebody perhaps finding their own roots and finding where they need to belong and so on. And no referral was made. That kid is doing fine and so on. But I was thinking, this is a Muslim teacher. Imagine a white head teacher who would actually not have that knowledge, would be referring that kid on and so on. And before you know it, you know, I know they do all this vetting and so on, but there is a sort of it goes on the file. This might be a Prevent issue. So I think, you know, it's a very sensitive area and it needs to be handled really, really well and so on. I know they are looking at, you know, changing some of that training and so on and getting better people to do the training, because first of all, it's a bit like some of the initial Ofsted training, which is very much you have to do X, Y, and Z without really any understanding of some of those issues in that local community. I mean, working in Havering, where I'm now, honestly, the rise of the far right and its impact on some of the young people and actually their parents is pretty rife out there. So I'm very conscious of that. You know, that there are challenges that need to be made. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question or hand up from Mirana.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to pick up specifically on the point of curriculum and encouraging creativity that you were talking about earlier. So my work specifically, I was in the Aziz Foundation Scholarship Programme in 2017-18, so that was a little while ago. And I'm working on music education for Muslims and specifically looking at research about music in Islam and that sort of thing. I wondered if you could comment specifically on the issue of music in Islamic schools and how you feel the kind of teachers are managing the kind of conflicts between communal expectations about music and the governmental national curriculum.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the school where I was head teacher was in 11-16 comprehensive school, and I was very, very keen that we had the full breadth of the curriculum, you know, offered at Key Stage 3. And in fact, we used to have, before obviously all the national agenda to do with EBAC and so on, actually we had an arts offer for everybody as well at Key Stage 4, where they did a little bit of drama or music, or they did 2 out of the 3 for drama, because I felt a lot of students would miss out on that and so on. Art results in our school were phenomenal. And in fact, I used to have a few parents saying, oh, we don't want our children to do art and so on. And we actually had a phenomenal art teacher who actually was Muslim and had such a wide variety of mediums through which children could learn that our results shot up to about 89% A to A stars, just because the curriculum was right for our students. And yeah, I introduced music. There was a resistance from a few parents. But then we tried to, you know, choose a head of music who actually was very knowledgeable about the communities and could do a whole variety of experiences for young people, ranging from ghazals to, you know, pop music and so on. So you actually engage the students, and, you know, music was part of our, you know, weekly themes and, you know, different artists were used and so on. And it became part, I think when you're a successful school, people are less critical. Let's put it that way. In a comprehensive school, you know, they won't make a big fuss about music or art and so on. If you're a failing school, then people want to pick holes in everything within the curriculum, but it has to come from the top. I felt, you know, the experience I wanted in that school were experience I wanted my children to have. My daughter learnt the cello when she was at school, and I was very keen. My son learned his recorder and so on. So I wanted the children in my school to have that experience. So balancing it, you know, with, you know, what their other interests were, you've got to maximize those sort of opportunities. I had peripatetic teachers in, you know, we were teaching all sorts of musical instruments, not just the sort of violin and so on, but, you know, some of the Asian instruments as well. We had a, you know, a tabla group coming in and teach some of our children, and the parents came along to listen to those performances. So it can be done. It's hard, but it can be done. And I think Key Stage 3 is not so much of a problem, because you can say it's a national curriculum. But I think even within that national curriculum, if you can relate it to the different communities, then it's a lot more meaningful.
Great, thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, we have a question from Raisa.
Hello, hi, my name is Raisa. Thank you so much for your talk, Bushra. It's been really interesting. And everything you've been saying about identity has really resonated with me. My question is around the careers education in schools. I work for an organisation that runs mentoring programmes across London and other kind of employer engagement. And we do work with a lot of Muslim students. My question is, how important do you think it is for Muslim students to have Muslim mentors or Muslim role models compared to just general employer engagement? Because at the moment, our mentors don't reflect our students that much, and it's an ongoing conversation we're trying to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to a little bit in that film that has what we talked about, Mosaic and their mentoring program. It was set up, requested by Prince Charles, actually, after you know, all the bombings in London and so on, and there was a real concern about marginalised Muslim youth and so on. So that mentoring program was set up in order to find relatable role models for Muslim students from the business community. And we're now part of Prince's Trust, and there is a phenomenal program going on there where they will be linked up with a mentor who will be trained by the Prince's Trust. Then they will come into school, meet with the individual, work with groups and so on, and then also will go into the workplace for a day as well. I mean, in lots of middle class families, children will get that sort of link into internship or somebody working, you know, in one of the top law firms or whatever through contacts from parents. Our children won't get that. So there've got to be mechanisms by which that happens and so on. And I think the more the sort of careers program or the development programs allows young people to have that access that, you know, other children is a norm, is to be admired and so on. And if I can give you the example in my school, in Draper's schools, where it's a very white, working class, loads of, you know, parents unemployed and so on. And the Draper's company, which is a livery company which sponsors it, actually do a mentoring program for our students. Now, predominantly, most of those are white, second, third generation unemployment. But, you know, so the students are invited to Draper's Hall. And if you've ever seen it, they did the filming of the King's Speech there. So they go into this hall, they meet a mentor, somebody who's an architect, somebody who's a lawyer, whatever. And it's the first time they've had that experience to raise their aspiration. So it's phenomenal what you're doing, because that's exactly what Muslim students need. And we need the training, and we need those Muslims to come forward to help young people and so on. And so on. Okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, and apologies for my mispronunciation of your name, Raisa. I have a question. I think everyone has asked theirs, and it's really about the current pandemic has brought up a lot of discourse about the important role that schools really play in terms of a sort of a pastoral capacity. So thinking of preschool meals, providing a safe haven for students, a place for sort of internet connection if they don't have them at home. And for many new teachers, this might be quite new in terms of coming face to face with some of the realities in which some of these families live. And I wanted to ask, how supported, do you think new teachers feel in terms of this pastoral role? Is there a space for sort of more kind of training around it? And how can they feel sort of better prepared at really understanding how to respond to this and to support these children and families as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, not just new teachers, Soraya, but experienced teachers, been around in education a long time. The horizons have just changed about, remote education and some of the challenges to do with that, how you best provide it. I mean, from basics like, as you said, free school meals, that wouldn't even come on the horizon for most teachers, that they get this and it's somebody else's problem. But when Marcus Rashford raised it, and then you saw those things to do with the food packages, it made you certainly aware what some of the desperate state of some of those families is. Things about remote education, the number of children who haven't got computers, and what the other ways that they can actually learn to do with, textbooks or whatever. I think that there's been a lot of change within education, but I think it's allowed us to see the child not from just that educational perspective, but within their family and what are the barriers. So the ability for children to be able to talk to a teacher or an individual about what's stopping them from learning, honestly, will be very helpful. And it's not just resources, it is to do with sort of the language, it's to do with all the other stuff that's going on for young people, isn't it? Because, when you look at some of the children, they are totally isolated from anybody else. So therefore the social aspects aren't happening. The learning, I don't think it can be in any way as good as what it is when they're in schools and so on. So there is that thing, having the tensions when families are all together, the number of children we're having to refer on for domestic violence, all those issues. So we're going to have to pick up a lot of issues when we get back into school. And even when children came back in September, we were beginning to uncover quite a lot of, in our secondary schools, certainly some of the issues on social media between young people and families, honestly, were beginning to play out in schools. Some of the fights and some of the arguments were coming into school and so on. So you could say it as a problem, but it's also an opportunity to begin to understand young people holistically rather than just from that educational perspective.
Thank you. It's coming up, it's past 6 now. Thank you everyone for asking such brilliant questions, and thank you, Bushra, for your time and your answers and your insights. It's been really, really valuable, and I'm sure everyone feels the same. I'll hand over to Dawood to close, but just to thank you once again, and thanks everyone who's joined us on the call today. Okay.
Thank you so much indeed. It's a real pleasure to spend an hour with you. And I really want to end by saying, Nelson Mandela's thing, education is the most powerful weapon to change your lives. So you are in that position to change people's lives. So use that opportunity, and may Allah bless you for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Bushra. That was really insightful.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I think just on a closing note, just for everyone to keep an eye out, as I said before, on their inbox for interesting talks that are hopefully going to be arranged, like this one today, in the next few months. But yeah, that's all I had to say from my part.
Okay.
So just thank you again.
Okay. And just to mention, I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to just get a bit of advice or support, I'm available on LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, if that was okay, Soraya.
Sorry?
I just wanted to jump in, if that was okay, just to say,
Yeah.
you know, big thanks to Bushra. It was really inspirational. It's really great to see someone who's really in love with the profession that they're doing, and really see it as a privilege. And I think you're sort of busier now that you've retired than you were before. And I'm glad you mentioned that LinkedIn, because I wasn't sure whether to say to people, well, you know, if you want to contact Bushra, here's her contact details, because I know how busy you are. But if people have further questions to learn from your experience, I mean, that'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bushra. You've been a great supporter of Aziz Foundation.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone. If anyone's got any other questions, you can just get in touch with us. And as Dawood has mentioned, hopefully we'll have some other, we'll have a regular sort of webinar series, a sort of monthly one.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Thank you.